Captain James Walker stood at the command center of HMS Thunder, his eyes fixed on the holographic display, showing the vast emptiness of space. The patrol route along the edge of human space was usually quiet, but something felt different today. The ship's massive engines hummed softly, a sound that had become as natural as breathing to him over his 15 years of service. "Captain," called out Tom from the communication station, his voice cutting through the routine bridge chatter. "I'm picking up something strange. It's not following any known communication patterns." Walker moved to the communication station, his boots making soft thuds against the metal floor. The Thunder was one of humanity's newest ships, built to withstand conditions that would crush most alien vessels. Even the simple act of walking required special gravity generators. The crew's natural adaptation to Earth's heavy gravity meant they needed higher G-forces to function comfortably. "Put it through," Walker ordered, leaning over the console. The bridge speakers crackled to life, filling the air with a series of musical tones and light pulses that seemed to dance together in perfect harmony. Lisa, the ship's xenolinguist, was already running the signal through the translation matrix. Her fingers flew across the holographic keyboard as she worked to decode the alien message. It's a distress call, Captain," she said, her eyes widening. "But like nothing we've ever seen before. The language structure suggests a species that communicates through both sound and light simultaneously." The translation appeared on the main screen, converting the complex message into simple text. "Emergency. Any listening species. Swarm a purochichis. Deluminamine ARI homeworld under ATTCK. Please help. We see an not survive alone *. Walker's expression hardened. The swarm. Every spacefaring race's nightmare. They had heard stories about this hive-mind species that consumed everything in its path, but this was the first confirmed contact. "How far?" Walker asked his navigation officer, Mark. Mark's hands danced over his station. "The signal originates from the Centauri Beta sector, sir. About 6 hours at maximum drive." Walker tapped his command console, bringing up the sector map. It was just beyond the edge of human space, in a region they had planned to explore next year. He opened a channel to the engine room. "Ben, what's the fastest you can get us there?" 5 hours if I push the engines to 120%, Captain." Ben's voice crackled through the speaker. "Any more than that, and we risk burning out the containment fields." Walker nodded, though he knew his engineer couldn't see him. The containment fields were what kept the ship's massive fusion engines from turning everything into plasma. "Do it, and get me a line to command." As the communication officer worked to establish a secure channel, Walker studied the distress message again. "The Luminary. A new species, unknown to humanity, asking for help against a threat that could wipe them out." The diplomatic implications alone were staggering. The main screen flickered, showing Admiral White's stern face. "Captain Walker, report." "Admiral, we've intercepted a distress call from an unknown species called the Luminary. They're under attack by the swarm," Walker said, sending the translated message to command. "Request permission to respond." The Admiral was quiet for a long moment, reading the message. "The swarm. This could be our chance to make first contact with a potential ally, or it could be a trap." He looked up. "How many ships do you have in your patrol group?" 3, sir. The Thunder, Lightning, and Storm. 3 ships against the swarm." The Admiral's voice trailed off. Then his expression changed, showing the determination that had made him famous during the Mars Rebellion. "You have permission to respond, Captain. I'm redirecting the 7th Fleet to your coordinates. They'll be 8 hours behind you. Remember, you're not just representing your ship now. You're representing all of humanity." "Understood, sir," Walker said crisply. "We'll do our best to keep them alive until reinforcements arrive." As the communication ended, Walker turned to his crew. "Sound battle stations. Send word to Lightning and Storm. We're going in hot. The Luminary asked for help, and we're going to show them what humanity can do. The bridge erupted into activity as klaxons blared. Walker returned to his command chair, feeling the slight increase in vibration as the engines pushed beyond their normal limits. Somewhere out there, an alien species had asked for help, not knowing they had reached the only ships in the sector crewed by Deathworlders, humans who had evolved on a planet that most species considered uninhabitable. "Hold on, Luminary," he muttered. "The cavalry is coming." The HMS Thunder dropped out of faster-than-light travel with a flash of light, followed closely by lightning and storm. The sight that greeted them made even the seasoned bridge crew pause in awe. Ahead floated massive crystalline structures that sparkled like diamonds in space. These were the luminary ships, their hulls seeming to capture and reflect starlight in beautiful patterns. But the beauty of the scene was marred by the dark shapes moving among them. The biological ships of the swarm, their surfaces covered in chitinous armor that absorbed light rather than reflected it. "Multiple targets detected," reported Mark from his station, counting at least 30 swarm vessels. They're using some kind of acid weapons against the luminary ships. Walker watched as a stream of greenish liquid struck one of the crystal ships, eating through its beautiful hull like butter. "Open a channel to the luminary vessels," he ordered. "All frequencies, including light-based communication." Lisa worked quickly at her station. "Channel open." "Sir, this is Captain James Walker of the Human Protection Fleet vessel Thunder. We received your distress call and are here to help. Please respond." For a moment, there was silence. Then the bridge was filled with a symphony of light and sound, the natural language of the luminary. The translation matrix worked quickly to convert it to speech. "Human vessels, this is Commander Lightsong of the Luminary Defense Fleet." A melodious voice spoke through the translator. We did not expect anyone to come. The swarm attacks without mercy, and we cannot." An explosion cut off the transmission as another crystal ship shattered under the swarm's assault. "All ships, battle formations," Walker commanded. "Tom, get me shield status. Lisa, maintain contact with the luminary. Mark, plot us an attack vector that puts us between those crystal ships and the swarm." The bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency. The Thunder's engines roared to life, pushing the massive ship forward at speeds that would have crushed most alien crews. The artificial gravity strained to compensate, but the human crew barely noticed. Their bodies were built for such stresses. "Luminary vessel, be advised," Walker transmitted. "We're moving to engage the swarm. Our ships can take more damage than yours. Fall back and regroup behind us." The response came quickly, tinged with what the translator identified as disbelief. "Your vessels. The gravity forces of such maneuvers would kill any living crew." Walker allowed himself a small smile. "Not us, Commander. We're from what you might call a high-gravity world. Now please fall back. We'll show you how humans fight." The Thunder's weapons came online as they approached the swarm ships. The enemy vessels were massive, easily twice the size of the human ships, their biological hulls rippling with muscle-like movements. "Sir," Tom called out, "the swarm ships are releasing some kind of spore cloud. Radiation levels are off the charts." "Radiation?" Walker asked. "What level?" "About 50 rads per second, sir." Walker nodded. What was lethal to most species was barely an inconvenience to humans, whose bodies had evolved to handle the radiation levels of Earth. "Maintain course. Fire when ready." The Thunder's main guns opened up, followed by lightning and storm. Streams of plasma cut through space, impacting against the swarm's biological armor. Where the luminary's weapons had barely scratched the surface, the human weapons burned deep holes. "Luminary Commander," Walker transmitted as his ships engaged the enemy. "We need information. What are their weak points?" Lightsong's response came amid another beautiful display of light and sound. "The central nerve cluster, but the radiation defense makes it impossible to get close enough to target it." "Impossible for you, maybe," Walker replied. "Lieutenant Reed, prepare boarding teams. Let's show these aliens why they call us Deathworlders. As the human ships pressed their attack, the luminary watched in amazement. These strange new allies moved their ships in ways that defied their understanding of biology, shrugged off radiation that would kill most species, and fought with a ferocity that matched the swarms. Perhaps, light song transmitted to their own fleet, the universe has sent us not just allies, but guardians. The battle was far from over, but for the first time since the swarm appeared, the luminary felt something new: hope. The boarding pods launched from Thunder's belly like angry hornets, each carrying 5 heavily armed humans. Walker watched from the bridge as they streaked toward the nearest swarm ship, cutting through the radioactive spore cloud that surrounded the massive biological vessel. "Luminary Commander," Walker transmitted while monitoring the boarding operation, "we need you to target the ship's outer defenses. Give our teams the distraction they need." The crystal ships moved with graceful precision, their light-based weapons creating beautiful patterns in space as they struck the swarm vessel. While their attacks couldn't penetrate deeply, they kept the enemy's attention divided. Inside the lead boarding pod, Sergeant Mike Peters checked his weapon one last time. "Remember, team, we're looking for the central nerve cluster. Standard Earth gravity in there, so we'll be stronger than usual. Use it to your advantage." The pod struck the swarm ship's hull with a sickening crunch, drills engaging to cut through the living armor. The interior was like being inside a giant organism. Walls pulsed with blood vessels, and the floor was covered in a spongy tissue that absorbed their heavy footfalls. "Radiation levels are rising," one of the team members reported, checking his suit readings. "We're at 200 rads now." "Just another day on the beach," Peters replied with a grunt, remembering the shores of their home world where background radiation would terrify most alien species. "Keep moving." Back on the Thunder's bridge, Walker received a transmission from Lightsong. The Luminary Commander's voice carried what the translator identified as a mix of awe and horror. "Captain, our sensors show your boarding teams are moving through areas of lethal radiation without protection. You must recall them immediately." Walker allowed himself a small chuckle. "Commander, what you consider lethal radiation is what we call a sunny day on Earth. Our bodies evolved to handle it. Just watch what happens next." Inside the swarm ship, Peters' team encountered their first resistance. Warrior drones emerged from the organic walls, their clawed limbs dripping with acid. But the drones had evolved to fight enemies from low-gravity worlds. They weren't prepared for humans. Peters demonstrated this by grabbing the first drone that lunged at him and using his Earth-evolved muscles to throw it bodily into 3 of its companions. In the ship's standard gravity, the humans were like superpowered beings compared to the creatures adapted for lighter worlds. "Central nerve cluster should be 2 chambers ahead," Peters reported back to Thunder. "These drones aren't ready for close combat with Deathworlders." The Luminary fleet watched in stunned silence as human boarding teams penetrated deep into multiple swarm ships. Lightsong's science officer, Brightthought, was frantically analyzing the data. "Commander," Brightthought reported, his light patterns showing extreme agitation. "These humans, their cellular structure is incredibly dense. Their bones are like metal compared to ours, their muscles far more efficient, and their bodies seem to actively repair radiation damage." "How is this possible?" Lightsong asked, watching as another swarm ship began to convulse from internal damage. "They claim to be from a death world called Earth," Brightthought replied. "I accessed their shared data. Their planet has gravity almost twice what we consider survivable, constant background radiation, extreme temperature variations, and thousands of predator species. By all our criteria, their world should be impossible to evolve on." Inside the swarm ship, Peters' team reached the central nerve cluster, a massive chamber filled with pulsing brain-like tissue. They quickly planted their charges while fighting off increasingly desperate drone attacks. "Thunder, this is boarding team 1, Peters transmitted. "Charges set. Requesting immediate extraction." Walker's voice came through clearly. "All boarding teams, get out now. Luminary fleet, prepare for shockwave. The boarding pods shot away from the swarm ships just as the charges detonated. The massive vessels began to spasm, their biological systems thrown into chaos as their central control was destroyed. Impossible. Light Song transmitted, watching the swarm ships tear themselves apart from the inside. You've accomplished in minutes what we couldn't do in weeks of fighting. Not impossible, Commander, Walker replied, watching his teams return safely. Just another day for humans. This is why we survived Earth, and why we'll help you survive the swarm. We're Deathworlders, and we're just getting started. Lieutenant Anna Reed stood in Thunder's laboratory, studying the samples collected from the destroyed swarm ships. The biological material writhed in its containment field, still alive despite being separated from its host vessel. Through the lab's viewport, she could see the remaining swarm ships regrouping at a distance, their dark shapes like wounds in space. Captain, she called over the ship's comm, I think I've found something interesting. You might want to see this. Walker arrived minutes later, followed by Light Song, who had requested permission to board the Thunder. The Luminary Commander's crystalline form cast rainbow patterns on the lab walls as they moved. Watch this, Reed said, taking the small vial from her pocket. She opened it near the contained swarm tissue. Within seconds, the tissue began to deteriorate. What did you do? Light Song asked, their light patterns shifting in what the translator indicated was surprise. Reed smiled. That was a sample of the human common cold virus, slightly modified. The swarm's biological ships are vulnerable to it. Their immune systems have never encountered anything like Earth's pathogens. Walker leaned closer to the sample, watching it break down. Can we weaponize it? Already working on it, Reed replied, moving to another workstation where several machines were processing data. Their ships are basically giant living organisms. We can modify our virus delivery systems to create a widespread infection. The cold virus won't kill them immediately, but it will weaken their ship's biological systems significantly. Light Song's form flickered with concern, but delivering such a weapon would require getting close to their ships again. The swarm has already adapted their tactics against boarding parties. We don't need to board them this time, Reed explained, pulling up a holographic display. Their ships are constantly releasing spores for communication and defense. We can use their own biological network against them. One infected ship will spread it to the others. Walker nodded slowly, understanding forming on his face, like a real cold spreading through a crowd. Exactly, Reed said. And here's the best part. The virus is harmless to both humans and Luminary. It only affects the specific biological structure of the swarm ships. The lab's door opened, and Ben, the chief engineer, walked in carrying a modified missile casing. The delivery system is ready, Lieutenant. We've adapted our standard missiles to carry the viral payload instead of explosives. Walker turned to Light Song. Commander, we'll need your fleet's help. Your light-based weapons may not penetrate their hulls deeply, but they're perfect for creating a distraction. We need to get at least one infected ship into the middle of their formation. The Luminary Commander's light patterns shifted through various colors as they processed the plan. You would use a disease as a weapon. This is unexpected, yet fascinating. On our worlds, diseases are rare. We never considered them as potential weapons. On Earth, Reed explained, diseases shaped our evolution as much as predators did. Our bodies are constantly at war with countless microscopic enemies. It's one of the reasons we're so resilient. We've been fighting these battles since life began on our world. The ship's computer beeped, highlighting new movement from the swarm fleet. They were beginning to advance again, their formations tighter than before. How long until the missiles are ready? Walker asked. 2 hours, Ben replied. We need to modify enough to ensure at least one gets through. Walker nodded. Light Song, can your fleet hold them off that long? The Luminary Commander's response was immediate. We will do what we must. Our ships may be less durable than the swarms, But we are not without resources. Their form brightened with determination. We have already seen what your people can do. Now let us show you what the Luminary are capable of. 2 hours, Walker repeated, looking at the approaching swarm ships. Lieutenant Reed, you have 1 hour and 50 minutes to perfect your virus. Then get those missiles ready. The swarm thinks they're facing a simple enemy. Let's show them what happens when you push humanity into a corner. As the teams dispersed to their tasks, Walker couldn't help but appreciate the irony. The swarm had evolved to be the perfect biological weapon, but they had never encountered the diseases that had helped forge humanity into Deathworlders. Sometimes, he thought, the smallest enemies make the best weapons. The space between the fleets erupted in a dazzling display of light as the luminary ships executed their part of the plan. Their crystalline vessels moved in complex patterns, creating a web of energy beams that forced the swarm ships to adjust their formation. All ships, battle stations, Walker commanded from Thunder's Bridge. Launch viral missiles on my mark. The modified missiles sat ready in their tubes, each carrying Lieutenant Reed's engineered cold virus. The human fleet had positioned themselves behind the luminaries' light show, using the energy discharge to mask their heat signatures. "Sir," Tom called from his station, detecting increased spore activity from the swarm ships. "They're trying to communicate through their biological network." Walker smiled grimly. "Perfect. That network will help spread our virus." Status of the 7th Fleet. "Still 2 hours out, Captain," Mark replied from navigation. "We're on our own for now." The swarm ships pressed forward through the luminary's energy web, their massive forms rippling with angry patterns. They had learned from the earlier battles and were keeping their formations tight, making it harder for boarding parties to isolate individual ships. "Luminary Fleet, begin Phase 2. Walker transmitted. Lightsong's fleet responded immediately. Their energy beams concentrated on a single point, creating a visible gap in their defensive line. It looked like a mistake, a weakness in their formation. The swarm took the bait. "They're moving to exploit the gap," Mark reported. "Lead elements of their fleet are breaking formation." Walker leaned forward in his command chair. "Wait for it." The first swarm ships pushed through the gap, their biological weapons already firing streams of acid toward what they thought were vulnerable luminary vessels. But the crystal ships scattered like startled birds, revealing the human fleet waiting behind them. Fire. The viral missiles launched from all 3 human ships simultaneously. The swarm, caught in their own tight formation and committed to their attack, couldn't evade effectively. Multiple missiles struck their targets, their warheads breaking open to release clouds of modified virus directly into the swarm's spore networks. "Direct hits on 5 swarm ships," Tom reported. "Their biological signatures are already showing changes." Through the main viewport, Walker could see the effect spreading. The infected swarm ships began to move erratically, their biological systems fighting the unfamiliar Earth pathogen. More importantly, they were still releasing spores, now carrying the virus to their companion ships. "Sir," Mark's voice was urgent, 3 swarm ships breaking through on Vector 7. "Lightning, Storm, engage those ships," Walker ordered. "Thunder will handle the center. Show them what Earth gravity training means in a space battle." The 3 human ships moved with devastating speed and precision. Where the luminary had to fight carefully to avoid deadly forces, the human crews could handle maneuvers that would kill most alien species. Thunder executed a tight turn that put her directly in the path of the largest swarm ship, her weapons blazing. "Virus is spreading through their fleet," Reed reported from her lab. "Their immune responses are going haywire," just as predicted. The battle space became chaos as infected swarm ships began to lose control. Some fired wildly, their weapons striking their own companions. Others spun helplessly, their navigation systems compromised by failing biological computers. "Enemy flagship detected," Tom called out. "It's trying to retreat." "Not today," Walker said. "All ships, focus fire on that flagship. Luminary Fleet, cut off their escape route." The combined fleet moved like a well-oiled machine. The Luminaries' energy weapons herded the swarm flagship toward the human ships, while Thunder, Lightning, and Storm closed in for the kill. Flagship hit, Mark announced. Multiple viral warheads on target. The massive swarm vessel shuddered as the virus took hold. Its surface began to mottle and decay, the proud biological ship reduced to a sick, failing organism in minutes. Lightsong's voice came through the comm. Captain Walker, the remaining swarm ships are attempting to retreat. Their fleet coordination appears completely broken. Walker watched as the mighty swarm fleet, which had terrorized the Luminary for weeks, began to fall apart. Ship after ship succumbed to the engineered virus, their biological systems unable to cope with this new threat from humanity's death world. Sometimes, Walker said quietly, the deadliest weapons come in the smallest packages, like the viruses that helped make us who we are. The battle was over, but the cost was written across the starlit void. Debris from both swarm and human ships drifted silently through space, a graveyard of metal and organic matter glinting in the starlight. Walker stood at Thunder's viewport, his face reflecting in the reinforced glass as he watched recovery ships moving through the wreckage. Final casualty report, sir, Tom said quietly, handing over a tablet. The numbers were better than they could have hoped for, but each loss still hit hard. The HMS Lightning was gone, destroyed when 3 swarm ships had made their final desperate attack. Captain Bill Mason, Walker's friend since their academy days, had gone down with his ship after ensuring his crew made it to the escape pods. How many did we lose? Walker asked, though he'd already read the numbers. 27 dead, 48 wounded across all ships, Tom replied. Lightning's crew mostly made it out, but Captain Mason. He trailed off, knowing Walker and Mason's history. The bridge was quieter than usual, the victory tempered by loss. Through the viewport, Walker could see the luminary ships helping with rescue operations, their crystalline forms casting beautiful light patterns that seemed like a funeral tribute to the fallen. Lightsong's image appeared on the main screen, their light patterns subdued. Captain Walker, we have recovered more of your escape pods. All surviving crew are being transferred to Thunder now. Thank you, Commander, Walker replied. He watched as another shuttle docked, bringing more survivors home. How are your people holding up? We mourn your losses as our own, Lightsong said. Never in our history has another species sacrificed so much to protect us. Captain Mason's actions, they will be remembered in our songs for generations. Walker nodded silently. He remembered Mason's last transmission. They're not getting past us, James. Get that virus into their flagship. We'll hold them here. Then Lightning had driven straight into the midst of the swarm ships, its weapons blazing until the end. Lieutenant Reed entered the bridge, her face showing the strain of the past hours. Sir, we've analyzed the remaining swarm debris. The virus worked better than expected. Their entire biological network collapsed. Any surviving ships will be too sick to fight for weeks, maybe months. And the virus can't spread to other species, Walker asked, though they'd confirmed this earlier. No, sir. It's specifically engineered for their biology. The Luminary and other races are completely safe. The ship's comm system crackled. Captain, Ben's voice came from engineering. The 7th Fleet just dropped out of FTL. Admiral White is requesting to come aboard. Walker straightened his uniform. Tell them they're clear to dock. He turned to his crew. I want all department heads in the main conference room in 20 minutes. We need to brief the Admiral on everything that happened here. As the bridge crew moved to comply, Walker took one last look at the battlefield. The swarm ships that hadn't been destroyed were drifting helplessly, their once mighty biological systems ravaged by a simple Earth virus. It was a victory, but the cost. In the conference room later, Walker stood before a holographic display showing the battle's progression. Admiral White and Lightsong listened as he detailed the engagement, the virus strategy, and the sacrifices made. The swarm never expected to face something they couldn't overwhelm. Walker concluded, They didn't understand what it means to fight humans, that we bring not just our technology and our strength, but millions of years of evolutionary weapons they never imagined. And Captain Mason? Admiral White asked softly. He died as he lived, sir, protecting others, no matter the cost. Walker's voice was steady, but his hands gripped the edge of the display table tightly. Lightning's action gave us the opening we needed to infect their flagship. Without that, Lightsong's form brightened slightly. Among my people, we have a saying: the brightest light casts the strongest shadows. Your victory today was bright indeed, but the shadows it cast. The translator paused, processing the complex emotions in the luminaries' light patterns. We will honor your fallen as our own heroes, Captain. Their sacrifice protected not just humanity, but all species who stand against the swarm. Walker looked at the holographic display, at the marker showing where lightning had made its final stand. Bill always said the measure of a species isn't in how well they fight, but in what they're willing to fight for. He straightened, pushing the grief down. Let's make sure it was worth it. 1 week after the battle, the HMS Thunder's conference room was filled with both human and luminary representatives. The crystalline aliens' light patterns created dancing shadows on the walls as Admiral White signed the official alliance document with humanity. Walker stood at attention nearby, watching history being made. This marks a new chapter for both our species, Admiral White said, his voice carrying across the room. The first official alliance between humans and another spacefaring race. Lightsong moved forward, their form glowing with what the translator identified as deep emotion. We offer more than just an alliance, Admiral. The Luminary Council has voted to share our energy technology with humanity. Your people proved themselves not just powerful, but worthy of trust. The room buzzed with excitement. Luminary energy technology was centuries ahead of human developments. Combined with humanity's resilience and adaptability, it would change everything. Lieutenant Reed, standing near the back, couldn't help but smile. Her virus samples had already provided insights into creating better biological defenses against the swarm. Sometimes the best gifts come from our greatest challenges, she whispered to herself. There's more, Lightsong continued. We have sent messages to other peaceful species in nearby sectors. They should know about Earth and its people, not as the Deathworlders to be feared, but as protectors to be welcomed. Walker thought about how far they'd come. Just days ago, humanity had been alone in the galaxy, avoided by other species who saw their world as too dangerous, their people too primitive. Now they were being hailed as guardians. The swarm will return, Admiral White said, addressing the elephant in the room. They always do. But next time, they'll find us ready. Humanity and the Luminary, standing together. Lightsong's form pulsed with agreement. We will build automated warning stations throughout the sector. No distress call will go unanswered again. The swarm preys on isolated worlds. They shall find no more easy targets in this part of space. Walker's tablet beeped with a message. The construction of a permanent memorial had begun in orbit around the luminary homeworld. The names of the fallen, including Captain Mason and his crew, would be written in crystal that would shine for thousands of years. Captain Walker, Admiral White called. Step forward, please. Walker approached the center of the room, curious. The Admiral was holding something, a new insignia patch. In recognition of the Thunder's actions, and to mark this new chapter in human history, we're creating a new division, the Admiral announced. The Deathworlder Response Fleet, its mission, to protect any species that calls for aid against overwhelming threats. Captain Walker, you're hereby promoted to Fleet Commander. Walker accepted the insignia, feeling its weight, not just physical, but symbolic. Thank you, sir. We'll make it count. Indeed you will, Lightsong added. Already, 3 other species have requested to join our alliance. They were watching, Captain. They saw what humanity did for us. Not conquering, not demanding, but protecting. You've changed how the galaxy sees Deathworlders. As the ceremony continued, Walker found himself drawn to the viewport. Earth was visible as a small blue dot in the distance, looking deceptively peaceful from space. The world that had forged humanity in radiation, high gravity, and constant challenges had prepared them for this moment without anyone realizing it. "Quite a view," Ben said, joining him at the window. "Hard to believe that little blue marble out there is considered one of the most dangerous planets in known space." Walker smiled. Maybe that's exactly what the galaxy needed. People shaped by a world that never made things easy. We learned to be strong, but we also learned to protect those who needed help. Through the viewport, they could see the first luminary ships being fitted with human-designed armor plating, while human ships were being upgraded with crystal energy cores. Two species, learning from each other, growing stronger together. "You know what the best part is, sir?" Ben asked, grinning. The swarm thought they were the scariest thing in space. Turns out they'd never met anyone from a real Deathworld before. Walker looked at his new insignia, then back at the Earth in the distance. Somewhere out there, other species were sending distress calls, fighting their own battles against overwhelming odds. But now they had hope. The Deathworlders were coming to help. "We're just getting started," Walker said quietly. "And we got a galaxy to protect."